Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome to Watch You Want. Thanks for logging on. Today we're looking at a true apex predator of the aquatic world. This is the Oris ProDiver Chronograph. For those keeping score, this is reference 7630-71, 51 millimeters in diameter, crafted of alternately brushed and polished titanium with a vulcanized rubber bezel and ceramic insert. There's a lot of this watch to love. Now, Oris of Holstein, Switzerland has been around since 1904, and since 1927 it's been a privately held concern run by the Herzog family, and they have their own way of doing things. Now, since 2009, they've been building their own take on the modern luxury dive watch in the form of the ProDiver and the ProDiver Chronograph. This ProDiver Chronograph features all of the essential elements of that unique line. So we're going to put it on the wrist, we're going to break down its unique characteristics, and then just talk a little bit about what it has to offer in general. Now, on the wrist, this is a 6 1/3 inch, 16 centimeter circumference wrist, relatively flat in profile, fairly conventional in shape, and you can see just how big this watch is. The links themselves look like they're individually about the size of a 50s dress watch. This thing is like an aircraft carrier to the F-18 of a conventional, something like a Patek Philippe Calatrava. You feel like you could land a carrier aircraft on top of this thing. It is absolutely huge. But I will say this, it's very comfortable. In titanium, it's got substance to it. I mean, with this much size, how could it not? But it's not overwhelming. I'd say it has about the same mass as a steel Panerai 47mm Luminor with the 1950 case, if you want a mass comparable. It sits fairly evenly on my wrist. I have to say, the lugs, now I often talk about how giant watches have very short cropped lugs that more or less dive straight down to make them wearable, and you can see from this profile shot that's really the case. The lugs barely extend beyond the edge of the bezel, so this is a 51 millimeter watch, but it's really only about 54, 55 from lug to lug. And just for comparison's sake, a Rolex Yachtmaster 2 is 53 from lug to lug, and that's nominally a 44 millimeter watch. So this is not a huge 51 in terms of how it actually wears. It's got a giant dial and a giant bezel, but not necessarily a giant span lug to lug. I would say it's big, it's not enormous. And it distributes its mass nicely. It's got a large flat case back, and because the lugs are so broad side to side, and there is such an extensive crown guard, there's really no hot spot or pressure point. So very comfortable. Ultimately, only you can decide if this look is right for you, but ergonomically, there's nothing wrong with it. Now, the bracelet is large with alternately brushed and polished links. It's got large gaps between the actual links themselves, but it doesn't catch any skin or pull hair. And to me, that's the thumbs up or thumbs down, go, no-go factor when evaluating any kind of metal bracelet. This one's a thumbs up. So the Oris ProDiver features one standout feature that sets it apart. Aside from its colossal dimensions, it is the safety bezel. Now, Oris calls this the rotation safety system. It's a vulcanized outer grip on a bezel that rotates without actually turning the inner bezel itself with its calibrations. What you have to do to turn the bezel proper and actually set the index is pull it up. So you pull it upwards, and now you can turn it and you can align the index with the minute hand and time intervals, ostensibly dive intervals, up to 60 minutes. When you want to lock it in place and prevent any kind of unintentional motion, you simply snap it back. Now you can turn it without displacing the bezel itself or the index, so you can't unintentionally extend your dive. This is a great feature, very user-friendly. Without looking at any manuals or websites or documentation, I was able to figure out how it worked. So it's intuitive, it's got that, Apple thumbs up factor as well. It's something you can learn how to use without having to refer to the manual. A fantastic idea, beautifully executed, and the bezel inside is fully calibrated from the index to the Arabic numerals at each 10-minute station. It's highly legible. It's also very durable, being executed in nearly indelible ceramic. Ceramic's one of the modern wonder materials of the watchmaking industry that's really brought a lot of substance and quality and a substantive change from the old days of the anodized bezels, which could be scratched and wound up, looking like the bumper of a New York City cab after a few months. This will be shiny. It is a gloss finish. It will be smooth. It will be scratch-free pretty much for as long as you own the watch, unless you do something so traumatic that it's likely to cost you a few, square inches of skin and possibly some bone chips. Just about anything that your wrist will survive, this bezel will survive. Inside is a Oris caliber 774 chronograph movement, automatic winding with a 48-hour power reserve. It has a hacking feature, so stop seconds. You can synchronize it to a reference time. It is based on the fundamental architecture developed by Valjoux in the early 1970s for the 7750 chronograph, so it's 7750 tough. The base movement in this case is a Sellita SW500. It is a 25 joule movement. It has a 28.8 vibration, 28,800 vibration per hour rate, also known as 4 hertz. An automatic chronograph with a date. You've got just about all the features you would ever need on an everyday watch. Interesting features of the dial itself include applied dart indexes and a unique sort of embossed wave pattern, somewhat like a Bond Seamaster Professional. If you know the James Bond Seamasters and the blue wave pattern, there's a very similar motif running horizontally across the dial of this Oris ProDiver. But one feature that I find intriguing is the contrasting finish of each of the subdials. Now, there are 2 separate guillotines. They're concentric guilloche rings. One is silvered on the subdial at 12, and one is actually black and a little bit more subtle. This is the minutes register at 12 o'clock, the 60-minute register. Constant seconds at 9 o'clock features a very spare pattern. It's really just there to help you keep your mark when you're not running the chronograph. But at 6 o'clock, I find the most interesting finish of them all. It's an alternating silver and black stripe pattern that, now this is the chronograph hours register I should mention, but it's an alternating silver and black pattern that I can only really describe as Beetlejuice. And if you don't get the reference, I really can't explain it. Just type in Beetlejuice on Google, and I guarantee in 15 seconds you'll know what I mean. But the bottom line is, that's the vibe I'm getting from that sub-register, and it's the diversity of the detail on here, as well as the slightly dished Rayhaut featuring the calibrations of the minutes, the 60 minutes, outboard of the hour track, that add a lot of visual interest and prevent this dial from looking monolithic and austere. Now, the case itself, as I mentioned, is huge, but it packs a lot of features. In addition to that automatic winding chronograph movement and the safety bezel system tested to 1,000 meters, as you can read right here, there is a helium release valve for this 1,000 meter diver positioned at 9 o'clock. A helium release valve, of course, for those who are diving in a bell or using exotic oxygen mixtures, or gas mixtures, I should say, at extreme depths. The helium release valve allows any helium that may seep into the watch in the course of the dive to seep out without blowing out your crystal. This actually happened in pioneering dive watches during the 60s and led to the invention of the helium release valve. You tell me you're not going to be diving in a bell. Very well. Like a Ferrari, it's nice to have performance potential that's there, even if you don't need it. Now, the watch is built like an absolute tank, not just figuratively, but literally. You can see that the lugs are actually screwed types, so there's not a spring pin in there. Like the Blancpain 50 Fathoms that I featured earlier, this watch features a bar that retains the bracelet held on by a screwed-in link. That is the most secure form of fixing available. And although it takes a little bit more effort to swap out a bracelet or a strap, again, it's that security that you get, the knowledge that the instrument's not going to fall off your wrist, that's reassuring and worthwhile, and in my opinion makes this the hallmark of a higher quality standard of manufacturing. The bracelet itself features an expanding dive clasp that's built into the clasp itself. You can see how that pops right out for use over a wetsuit, and as I often like to call out, also useful over a winter coat or a thick sweater. Full double trigger deployant clasp. When I put the dive extension in and I close the clasp itself, you can see it closes with a satisfying snick. The twin trigger assures that you'll never have an accidental deployment, so you don't have to worry about the watch falling off your wrist. Very secure instrument style. The caseback features a feet to meters conversion table. Now, I know you'd ask, why on earth would you ever take the watch off your wrist underwater to look at that? But this is more a feature for planning your dive on the surface. The watch was originally designed in 2009 based on the inspiration of deep-sea salvage divers. So a lot of the instrument features of the watch were designed with them in mind. Now, this Oris ProDiver Chronograph is a 100% complete set offered from WatchOne. All boxes, manuals, and accessories, including the tools to swap out the strap and a spare strap, are included with the watch. See all of the above on our website, Watch You Want, in high-resolution images if you're looking for a dive watch a little bit outside the mainstream that features original left-of-center type thinking, fantastic finish, unique engineering, and unique execution. This Oris ProDiver Chronograph, reference 763071, may just be the watch you want.